Well, I have my guests in the studio, but before I do the introduction, imagine a pregnant woman due for delivery sitting on motorbike and on a dusty, terrible road heading to a hospital to deliver. That is a common sight in the Pandai district of the northern region. My colleague.
Using the Salaga to Pandai District Road in the northern region of Ghana is a nightmare. Even with a good vehicle, navigating Pandai is very difficult. And as the dust settles, we are greeted with this. Idonker is in pain. She can hardly balance on the motorbike. We learned despite her laboring throughout the night, the baby would just not come out. She had just started bleeding, so her husband and sister carried her on the motorbike to the hospital. At a point, we couldn't bear simply filming a woman in labor groaning on the motorbike.
Let's go.
It takes more than 1 hour on the motorbike to the Pandai Polyclinic, the nearest health facility. But with our four-wheel vehicle, we could make it there in 45 minutes. Even in the relative comfort of our vehicle, Idonker still winces in pain as we move on the road riddled with potholes. Her sister clutched her firmly to give her support, but the labor pains were excruciating.
The hospital left or right? Okay.
Eventually we got to the hospital, but we could not use the main entrance because of construction works there.
And I have Andrew Ejapa Mesa, who is a member of parliament for Sekendi in the studio. Good morning to you, Andrew.
Good morning.
And then Al Hassan Suhini, member of parliament for Tamale North, also here. Good morning.
Good morning, Roland. Thank you very much for inviting
me.
And
tomorrow we will bring you the full story of what really transpired, not only with this woman, but talking about pregnant women getting access to the needed health and healthcare as and when they need it. And that will be brought to you by Jojo Kopna. I nearly said Solomon Jojo Kopna. That's what I was used to. But please, your initial comments on this.
I must say, even the little that you have shown is painful to watch. Maybe before that, I should say good morning to our viewers and good morning to my colleague.
Good morning, my friend.
Bobo. It's a reality that many of us think is very far from us because of our privileged positions. But if you are somebody who remains very much in touch with the day-to-day challenges of majority of our people in very remote parts of this country, you will know that this is a very common story of many women when it comes to delivery because of where they are located. And I mean, reproduction is a natural thing, but how can we make it easier and better? And you see, Roland, when I see stories like this, it makes me wonder if as a people, we really, really understand the enormity of the challenge that we are faced with in terms of the deficiency of our development, we tend to play to the gallery too much, especially with our politics. And we fail to address the concrete issues that really impact on lives. A number of things came to play. The nature of the road. But it's very common for us, for the convenience of our politics sometimes, to say, "Na roads we go chop." Very, very common for us to do that as politicians. If we don't say "Na roads we go chop," we will say the roads are too expensive. If we don't say the roads are too expensive, we say we are borrowing too much to do them. Road. The other issue that came to the fore is that even with the pickup, it took 1 hour 30 minutes to get to the nearest health facility, which is a CHIPS compound. Even with the, what do you call it?
With the normal health four-wheel drive.
Yeah, a four-wheel drive.
Picking them up.
1 hour 30 minutes. It tells you, therefore, that we can never underestimate the importance of these health facilities in our communities. No matter how prices of goods may be high, and they will always go high, if we have a government that is paying attention to that, it is our collective responsibility and duty to support such a government and not to poo-poo those things. Not to say that those facilities are too expensive. If they are too expensive, it is okay to raise them. But if we do it just for the sake of our politics and our convenience, it breaks my heart. And it's sometimes because of stories like this that some of us are very aware of. When a nation decides, people in government, maybe ministers, they decide through a directive by a president that 10% of their salary should be saved and used to build health facilities like CHIP compounds. Let's not ridicule it. We have done that before in this country. Let's not ridicule it. It saves lives. And just the shot that you have shown, like I said, very painful to watch, but it's the reality. But it also brings to fore the things we consider important as we do our politics and request, so much of our government. It is very easy again for all that I have said, to simply be put in a box that, oh, he's doing politics. But what is the use of politics if it is not meant to change our lives and prevent what we have just seen from happening? What is the use of politics? Why are we all in this enterprise if it is not to ensure that we take decisions and engage constructively in ways that will lead to the prevention of what we just witnessed? It's sad, Roland. We have a long way to go as a nation.
Well, good morning to your good self and my brother Alasan here, of course, to your cherished viewers, particularly my constituents in 2nd D. Very, very sad clip indeed. Very heart-wrenching. I mean, I had a challenge at a certain point watching it. And by and large, I agree with Alasan that we spend too much time in this country on things that are really not worth our time, particularly even within our political space. There are real issues that confront this country that possibly motivated some of us into this enterprise. But we spend a lot of time dwelling on the politicking. It's interesting, the point he made, For instance, last week, we spent practically the whole week critiquing the president's statement on the Al Jazeera interview. What he said and what he didn't say, what he meant and what he didn't mean.
It was an important statement that the president made. You don't think that homosexuality and its impact on the socio-cultural life is important?
It was indeed important.
Okay.
But Roland, you live in this country and you know the twist that people put to it, you know.
Well, the president's responses put those twists to it. The president's responses were not straightforward.
As far as I'm concerned, it was clear and to the point.
Very well.
But we spent precious man hours, you know, putting political twist to it, you know, and all that.
Well, I get your point.
We waste too much time on, if you ask me, needless things. When clear bread and butter issues that confront the greater majority of our people remain unattended to. It's important that, yes, I've always said that we'll do the politicking, and we should do the politicking at the appropriate time. But when it is time for governance, we need to govern. We need constructive criticism on government policy. We need to, by all means, put government on its toes. But many a time, the opposition oppose because, well, we have to oppose. But does the opposition that you put up really add value to the conversation? You know, so I think that this is a useful call from all of us who find ourselves in the political space. There's no need to always be dwelling on the political, you know, back and forth, you know. And so I won't respond to the contributions that some directive was issued by the former president to set aside 10% of people's salaries for, because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's the duty of government to provide these services that the people need. It's not people's contribution that really will make any significant difference. It may help, but what it is that governments have a duty to ensure that, you know, services as important as healthcare is brought to the doorstep of the people. Of course, free maternal care may be available, but if you're unable to access it, if you are not unable to go to the clinic to assess that facility, what really is the value? I mean, you can see the pain that the lady was going through just to get to the hospital, you know. And so I think that this is a wake-up call for all of us. We should put our minds together. This country belongs to all of us. We need to work assiduously in building it together. And I invite my brothers on the other side to support government, yes, criticize, but let's be constructive in our criticism and make sure that at least these things are reduced significantly so we build a better country for all of us.
All right. In Parliament last week, there was an approval of a $40 million loan facility, and it is to also complement some financial, perhaps, allocations for the senior high school program in Ghana, or the senior high schools in our country. Now, the facility will be used as additional financing for the secondary education improvement project, which would upgrade existing facilities in some 75 senior high schools. We know 107 other schools with an average of getting less than 30% in the WASI, as far as their performance are concerned, are to benefit, whilst 23 new schools are to be reconstructed out of the same amount. In talking about senior high schools also, the president has also been jabbing the NDC about scrapping pro-poor policies, but we'll talk about all that in a moment. But let's talk about senior high school. Last week, the Minister of Education addressed what they call the Meet the Press series, and He talked a lot about the efforts that the government was making to improve the current senior high school system. Now, with this also coming in, you also complement efforts to make sure that there's that commitment from government in improving the current states of the policy implementation with its minute problems or challenges that the schools are facing, wouldn't you say? I'll start with you, Mr. Japamesa.
Well, I mean, clearly, government's commitment to see to the successful rollout and sustenance of the free SHS is clear. I mean, I had the benefit of being in a briefing with the Minister of Education prior to the rollout of the program. And so I knew that beyond the costs and access issues that clearly had been established was confronting this country, that necessarily prevented a lot of people from going to school. There was also the issue of quality. And so the program in itself was designed to address all the issues in the SHS space. Of course, when the policy was rolled out, there's been some challenges. I was tempted to say few, but I would concede. And of course, the President himself and the Minister of Education have conceded that, yes, there have been problems, and these problems are being dealt with. Huge criticisms, particularly from my brothers on the other side. But what has been surprising to me in all of the discussion is as if they viewed the implementation of the SHS as an event. And so their expectation was that it was not going to come with problems. But clearly, implementation of every major policy, particularly within the education space, can never be an event. It's a process. I've heard arguments. Of course, the former president has said that some dialogue, was supposed to have taken place before this process was rolled out, when both parties was at idem, if you like, regarding the need for introducing some semblance of free education in our secondary school space. They preferred the progressive means, and we felt that it was important that it is rolled out comprehensively to capture all Ghanaians at the time of implementation, rather than doing it progressive, such that people will still fall off the ladder. And so, as we've gone along, the needed infrastructure, and I think that if all the stakeholders had complied with the directive that had been issued by the Ministry of Education regarding the placement, intake, submission of returns, based on which some needs assessment shortfalls will be made to the Secretariat to enable them address. If that rollout plan had gone according to what the ministry and the stakeholders had agreed, many of the problems that we've seen would probably have been much more smaller. And so it's welcome that some commitment has been made, some finances have been set aside, some additional facilities have been procured to augment the rollout of the program. And His Excellency the President has indicated quite clearly, unequivocally, that this policy is here to stay, and that government commitment is clear, and that whatever funding that is needed to, as it were, make it something that is sustained on a yearly basis would be done. So I was excited last week that I believe that this is not the first time that government has assessed this facility from the World Bank. Some component of it went into the 200 secondary schools that the NDC promised and delivered, I believe, some 23 complete and some additional numbers in progress. The total number was 40. No, I stand to be corrected.
70 plus were complete.
Yeah, but of course, I mean, the ones that were complete at the time of your exit was, I believe, about 20.
No, 70.
70
the
complete?
World Bank sponsored the 23.
Okay.
So
Okay.
70 out
And-
of
and
23
so-
out of
yeah,
the
that's-
70
that's-
plus.
that's fine.
for the
That's
World
fine.
Bank.
Actually,
I mean,
73.
I'm not arguing with the numbers. I mean, clearly, I have my own views about that program because, but then again, I mean, it's something that this government has committed to continue because, of course, public funds have gone into them, and so all the schools that are at various stages of completion would be completed, I believe, from this facility, and also redirect some of them towards upgrading existing schools to address the quality issues that we have all, indicated the need for. And so it's welcome. Thankfully, Parliament approved it without much objection from the NDC. And so let's see how it goes. And I think that in the spirit of the first story that we discussed, by all means, let's critique the policy, but let our criticism be constructive and adding value to improve the policy for the betterment of our people that we have been elected to serve.
Yeah, Roland, this particular loan was christened. It was given a name. And my colleague, my brother just said a while ago that it is not the first time we are assessing this loan. So clearly, it is a fact that this loan used to be tagged sanitary pad loan, just for the record. It was this same loan that President
That's the
Mahama...
Secondary Education Improvement Project, the SIPE.
Good. It was this same loan that President Mahama went for with the NDC government to improve projects. I mean, to improve secondary education in Ghana through projects and programs. It's that same loan. Nothing, absolutely nothing has changed. But if you Google today, sanitary pad loan, and you read the articles that some very well-meaning Ghanaians were deceived to write about President Mahama and the NDC at the time because of partisan propaganda. I am saying well-meaning Ghanaians because perhaps those Ghanaians were misled into thinking that indeed, as it was captured by the NPP, the president just took his government to the World Bank to take $156 million to buy sanitary pad for girls.
Well, it's on Google.
Yeah.
And Blackwood had to come and say the World Bank loan is not for sanitary pads.
Yeah.
It's on Google.
Alone.
In fact,
He said it was not for sanitary pads alone.
Yes, sure.
in fact,
Only.
why did he have to speak that way? Because it was made to seem that it was for sanitary pads.
And your direction
In
of this
fact,
conversation.
a press conference was held by the minority, addressed by the current health minister, Honorable Kweku Agyeman Menu, at which an indication was made that because the NDC used its numbers to pass it, despite their rejection, they were going to make an appeal to the World Bank to withdraw it. They did that. They did that. They said, in fact, I am happy he said that we didn't oppose it when they brought it to Parliament last Friday. Yes, we didn't, because we love Ghana. We didn't want to behave like they did, pretending that our secondary education does not need improvement. So we supported it. But when we brought it, the agitation led to a voice count, which they rejected. A head count had to be done. and the majority had its way. If not, Ghana would have lost that first loan, that first facility. If the NDC didn't stand its ground, if the NDC didn't have the numbers in Parliament, the first, which has led to this second, would have been lost. But the NDC stood its ground, they voted for it, and got the bad name for it, because very well-meaning Ghanaians were deceived into thinking that our government was borrowing for sanitary pads for schoolgirls. But it's just a component.
Which are supposed to take care of, is it 10,000 girls?
10,000 girls.
In deprived areas.
Bursaries. It's supposed to be bursaries, and it's not just sanitary pad. In fact, it is also for transportation for them to go to school.
No, the 10,000 girls would have the pads.
Yes, but what I'm saying
there were
is
other
that
components
as part
too,
of the bursaries, they were going to be given pencils, pens, school bags, in some cases bicycles, and then sanitary pads. But our friends in opposition beat us with the sanitary pads and got the whole of Ghana thinking that the whole 100.
So your point on this is what?
So my point is this, Roland. He said in the spirit of the first discussion, and that is why I want us to go with that spirit. That
but I thought you had defeated it already by
politics. Let our politics be based on principle and what is really necessary for our people, and not just for partisan gain, and not just for votes. Because, I mean, clearly, that tangent that our opponents went, you may be surprised, for which some people may have decided to vote against the NDC, was completely unnecessary. Because even in the presentation to Parliament last Friday, I was in Parliament, the report that the committee, the Finance Committee presented, talked about how this loan was effectively utilized and is one of the best utilized loans that this country have ever taken from the World Bank. About 86% utilization is what was quoted by the report, and actually used to improve secondary school education. In some cases, some of the schools got expansion in infrastructure. And like he said, about 20 of the senior high schools, called the Mahama Senior High Schools, which one of them actually claimed early this year, I'm talking about one member of parliament in Accra, claimed ownership of this year. Those were the things that the loan was used for. So as a result of that effective utilization, the World Bank has decided to give additional funding of 40 million, US dollars. And guess what, Roland? This was approved on Friday, on President Mahama's birthday. What a way to vindicate an innocent man. They brought the second charge. What a way to vindicate an innocent man. But you see, another interesting part that Honorable Mesa, it's not mischief. You see, that is the thing I spoke about earlier. When you say these things, it is very easy for someone to say he's doing politics.
Oh, but of course, that's what you are doing.
But is it?
It's so
are
clear.
you being real? Are you being honest? Did we really do that? Was it necessary for us to do that, to target sanitary pad loan? Why did we do that? What was the mischief intended to do? To make Ghana lose the benefits that we have had as a result of this? No, that's why I just want to put it in context. You see, now he introduces the fact that though he didn't go there too much, that he has problems with the secondary schools that were constructed. But public funds has gone into it already, and so they are committed to finishing it. The report that came to Parliament, Roland, said in part that as a result of the F-Cube, there are increasing numbers that want to access SHS. Now, the numbers that want to access SHS do not have facilities in the existing SHS to accommodate them. And so there's a need for us to access this money so we can continue the expansion and construction of more facilities to contain these people who are coming.
Because we've decided to.
And again, because we have decided to make it free. So the numbers are going to increase. And one important point that was made was that in the deprived communities, in rural areas, that peoples have 1 out of 6 chances to get SHS. It's in that report that they presented to Parliament. That in deprived, apart from the
report
general,
was not presented by us.
well, it was
a
presented by the
committee.
finance committee, and the finance committee is chaired by
Doesn't matter. You
But
are part of the finance committee.
I am not a member of the
No,
finance
you may
committee.
not be part, but
Yeah.
I'm saying that your side is part of the committee.
You mean,
Yes, you were
mean the
part of
minority
Absolutely.
side?
You were part of the finance committee.
I'm
when
not
the
part of
first
the finance
loan, No, I'm
committee.
talking about your side too. When the first loan came to Parliament,
And then
but
the
you
commentary
opposed it.
followed.
But is it
You
not a
opposed
fact
it.
that
So
an
if we
aspect
have
of it was to
decided to
buy
come
sanitary
together,
pads? That's the truth.
is that
It's
the
the truth.
argument you want to
No,
make?
no. That's not the argument that I want to make. But I'm
this-
saying,
so if you were opposed
that
to it, then
is it not the case that part of that 156 million that you contracted was to buy sanitary pads?
so if you are against it so
No,
much,
I'm
why are you
asking
taking the additional
a
funding?
simple question.
It was.
Is it not the case?
It is still part
But who
of
says this one? There's
It is still
sanitary
part
pad
of it.
components
It
in
is.
there.
It
There's
is.
nothing in there.
Go and check. You see, you
You-
were not in
you-
Parliament
you-
on Friday.
you
We
check.
debated this.
You
no,
check.
we debated it. You were not in Parliament. In fact, some of your members, Mark Asibe Yabua, who is the finance committee
But Friday was
chair,
a holiday. It was a Thursday. And
No, sorry,
was
I
at a
mean
meeting.
Thursday. Yes, Thursday. You were not there. You see, he actually even jovially said that we on the minority side couldn't tell who among them on the majority side today voted against it because he voted for it. Jovially. Because they all didn't want to now say that they were against it. So the part is still in it. It hasn't changed. The part is still in it. But we don't want to make an issue of it because we think it is for the good of Ghana. But the point I was making had to do with the report, actually admitting
From the
that
finance
in the deprived communities, peoples have 1 out of 6 chances to get a senior high school to attend. 1 out of 6 chances. It tells you the vision in citing some of the SHS, that you call Mahama SHS.
Close to the communities
Close
where
to
the
these
students can get
deprived
access.
communities.
So that they can get
Even
access.
though some of our friends still insist that those schools were put in forest
Absolutely.
and deprived areas. But I am telling you, per this report, it tells you that in those communities you consider forest and deprived, peoples in those communities have 1 out of 6 chances. So you improve their chances of getting SHS by locating a school near to them. That's visionary. That's not playing to the gallery. That's visionary. That is solving a concrete problem that we face as a people. That is not just whimsically announcing a free SHS without a containment measure.
Roland,
That is the difference.
you see, the problem...
on Thursday.
Yeah.
On Thursday, the education minister addressed a press conference, and he addressed a number of these issues that
He says the children can free themselves in Politan, but they don't have
he said that
places
he
of
said that
convenience.
government was committed to the free SHS program, and that the schools that initially had been built without the added facilities, but now had occupation of students who not only were enjoying but could need some perhaps other facilities like maybe lavatories, perhaps also some dormitories in the future would be provided with those facilities. But that's a good way to begin with, because then government also realizes that there may be challenges, but over time we have to improve those facilities.
Like you
for
said,
those
in the meantime, those who don't have
Yes.
places of convenience can
I know
free
you want to
themselves.
address it. Let me give you a quote before
Can free
let
themselves in Politan bags.
let him comment on this. But
Arrogance of power.
Well, I did not listen to the minister's press statement because, of course, we're in Parliament on the Wednesday. But you see, my
no, it was on a Thursday.
very well, I
Yeah.
was in
Yeah.
a meeting on Thursday anyway. So you see, my problem with the citing of some of the community, the SHS, he says that they cited it close to the communities. Now, these are supposed to be deprived communities where transportation itself is a problem. So if you cite a school 5-10 kilometers away from where people actually live, how are you solving the problems for them? You want the children to walk 10 kilometers to school every morning.
And you are saying the schools adapt day schools.
Yes, they were. And I'm saying that, you see, we can criticize where you see. I'm not saying that building the schools were wrong. I haven't said so. I'm saying that I have an issue with where some of them were situated, because I have seen one, okay, in the Hunter West district. It's so far away from where people actually live. So I asked myself, so how are they expecting the people to assess this school with where they've put it? And so there are problems with it. I would have thought that the Kufuor model of enhancing
or expanding
the existing infrastructure,
creating a model
was a better way to go. But we can agree to disagree.
It was called the model school program.
Yes, you see, you said in the spirit of the
but then it doesn't create access for communities, children in communities. Seriously.
Potentially. I do not have.
What is potential? I do
not have the statistics.
No. Let's be real. For example, Infantipim. You go to expand Infantipim, and for the model schools, my agency did some documentaries on it during that period, so I know very well. For example, you go to Kumasi Anglican, okay, it's just opposite the Kumasi Polytechnic, or now Technical University. They saw enormous expansion of facility during that period. But you go to a school, but it doesn't mean somebody who is in the hinterland of Ashanti can have access. If that person was a day school, it's better the school is nearer to you than when it's further away. I mean that should be the
other point to make on this, if you
sure,
yes,
please.
The other point to make on this is that, you see, it's not like the enhancement program was stopped by the NDC government. That is why this facility, the SHIP facility, was taken to enhance and expand infrastructure in already established senior high schools and to construct new ones.
So you're saying it's just a complementary...
So it is complementary. So whilst you are expanding, so that those who are
but the Kufuor one was a deliberate policy, so you saw more of the schools.
But what I'm saying is it's the same policy. It's just that the funding this time around is maybe not from GOG as it was at that time, but it is still expanding the existing infrastructure. And what you do by that is you attract, you create opportunity for communities that are close to the school. But what about opportunity for communities that are far from the school? That is where these schools that he thinks are wrongly placed come in. But again,
have you cited one of those schools?
Again, yes. Oh, I've seen it.
And you see that they are far off from habitable residences of
I don't think it's all of them, but definitely some of them.
No, myself, I've cited some.
You know, Roland, I was listening to Pastor Mensa Otabil one time ago, and he said he doesn't like hearing the name East Legon. Why? Because he was given a piece of land at East Legon when he started ministering, and he said it was too far.
No, he lives not too far from me.
So people should go and build around the schools.
What I'm saying is that
what's the mischief that you saw to kill?
Roland, this weekend I was in my school, Ghana Secondary.
Yes, at
the time, I'm sure if you give me time, I'd like to talk about it. At the time Ghana Secondary was put up, it was in a forest.
It was far off.
Very far from.
But it was a boarding school, wasn't it?
At the time Tamale Secondary School was put up, it was in a forest.
Was it not a boarding school?
At the time, I'm sure Prempe, what do you call it?
Yes.
It was far off.
But they had accommodation.
I'm talking about
they had accommodation for the students.
It was far off. Yes. Even University of Ghana was far off.
Of course, they had accommodation for students.
When you are only interested in solving today's problems, you have the thinking of my brothers in there.
No, I don't have the same thinking as yours.
If you are thinking of resolving a situation where peoples in a community have one out of 6 chances to get a senior high school, you will be doing what we are doing, and also mindful.
And for now, walk 10 kilometers to get to school every day.
And be mindful of the future, expansion of those communities.
Until that time, walk 10 kilometers to school every morning.
Mr. Japa, is that why perhaps with the president?
My name is Mr. Mesa.
Mr. Mesa. Okay. Mr. Mesa, so is that why the president, at the 60th anniversary celebration of the Kumasi High School, seemed to be telling the opposition NDC that when they had the opportunity to be in government, they decided to scrap pro-poor policy, so to speak, and apparent reference to government policy or announcement to move, allowances for trainees who are in whether nursing or teacher colleges, etc. And then also harping on the fact that the government was committed to things like free SHS and all that. But we know that policies that had been created in the past, whether it was a Kufuor administration, had been further expanded by the Mills Mahama-led administration. And thereof, I'm sure things may have been left by Rawlings either in a poor state or very good, but also improved by the Kufuor administration as well.
In the spirit of a continuing government, yes. But
yeah, so then
again,
the president should be making such
No. Because you see, you made several statements. And so I sought to agree with you in part, okay, that in the spirit of government being a continuum, that policies are initiated by others, others come and add to it, modify, improve, and all that. And in some instances, scrap existing policy. Because, like they kept saying, there's no physical space. Because when you take wages and salaries, interest payments, statutory funds, you have 97% of your total revenue gone. And so they felt in their prioritizing of managing the economy that, look, some things cannot be paid for by the state. And so, regardless of its impact on poverty alleviation, regardless of its impact on the ability of people to access, okay, we're going to take it out. And so that is what His Excellency the President said. But we have
But the policy was only at variance to what the Mahama-led administration was proposing at the time. For example, when I was doing undergrad or whatever it is I was doing before, I had to access students' loan. Now the Mahama administration says that we want to scrap the issuance of the free allowances and put you on student loan bursaries, or student loans, so to speak, in which you have a guarantor, and then you are given access to the loan. Of course, when you start working, it's deducted. But it doesn't give you no access or non-access to funding whilst you are in school.
It's completely different, because the student loan...
Yes, it's different in terms of what you get for free.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, you still get money to go to school, only that you get it upfront.
You see, let's not mix the two at all, because the loan policy that was being extended to the nursing and teacher training, which previously was, if you like, exclusive to the universities and the polytechnics, was completely different from the facility that had always been available for teachers and nurses. And it was a deliberate policy targeted at enhancing the capacity in those areas, because and it was born out of extensive studies that people were not accessing these facilities. We as a country had huge numbers of untrained teachers, and so deliberately let's provide some incentive to enable people access the teacher training. Of course, over
and that's
time,
still the case.
Of course, it is still the case that there's a huge number of people who are untrained who still teach. Okay, and we have a shortage of nurses, and so government policy. Of course, we do.
But we've not been employing nurses who have graduated, so I keep wondering.
How many nurses were employed this year, and how many have been provided for employment in the 2008 budget? And so if we're not employing nurses, I guess Mr. Suhini will have an answer to that, because it was under his government that nurses...
You are jabbing them like the way...
Yes, but of course, I mean, and it's clear. I mean, some of these things do not even need to be debated on, because we all know that the NDC scrapped some of these allowances to the teacher training and nursing training institutions, and it had a huge impact on the survival of students in those institutions. And we, listening to the cry from that particular constituents, promised that when we come into government, we were going to restore those allowances, because we felt that it was important that those facilities are still made available to people, and so that has been done. Yet, they are criticizing the free SHS, and have clearly indicated, and I've heard in several quarters, that when they come, they probably will scrap it and go back to their progressive. Oh no, but Mr. Mahama suggested something to that effect when he attended his march in Takwa.
It's not true. He didn't say that.
What did he say?
He said that the way the program was being implemented was not the right way,
and
that there needs to be a national dialogue,
and that the national
to realign.
And how is that going to happen?
No, I think if the tabloids concluded that it meant if the pro-government tabloids concluded.
Please, Roland, don't do this.
How is that related to scrapping? You just said
but you have scrapped existing policies. So what is it strange if you say that enough dialogue was not? What propaganda is related to this one?
Well, the truth is that they were scrapped, so you restored.
Yes,
yeah.
You scrapped existing policy. So is it strange when you make comments that clearly suggest that because of dialogue was not
I hope I'll have the same
entered into when you come, you will do it differently. I'm entitled to conclude that when you come, you are going to
please conclude for me. You've talked for 8 minutes, so let's.
All right.
So conclude for me.
You see,
out of which
I hope I also have 8 minutes.
But you are interjecting, so let me land. Then you can.
Please land.
You know. So yes, I mean it's evident that this is something that the president has committed, because as he's indicated, governance is all about priority. We have a basket of resources based on which we prioritize as to what to do with. And at the end of the day, the people of Ghana are going to hold you accountable. We think that with the level of development that we as a nation have achieved, it is important that we enhance our manpower, make sure that majority of our people get at least secondary education before we leave them out to go into the job market. And so, to enable them do that, addressing cost, access, and quality, we are going to provide free SHS. In fact, we are redefining basic education to mean from KG to SHS 3 and make that entire space free to enable majority of Ghanaians access that and build the capacity of this country.
Yeah, I was listening to Suhini. I listened to you on radio that last time. That was good being back.
Thank you. I
give you only 7 minutes.
we have always to unfair, but I'll take it like that. You are my friend. You know, sometimes I wonder when this our legacy-seeking propaganda president will stop.
Why? He's a legacy-seeking propaganda.
On the business of governing. I wonder when he will stop and concentrate on the business of governing.
When you make statements that he responds to, you say he's being propaganda.
I wish we had time to look at all the pro-poor policies that we have in this country. The NDC piloted the National Health Insurance Scheme. The NPP passed the legislation that made it seem like a national health insurance scheme, but indeed in practice it was a mutual scheme. It was not a national health insurance scheme.
Because it was district based.
Because it was rushed and it was not properly understood and implemented. It had to take the NDC to come back to power to truly make it national. That's the difference all the time. You look at the National Youth Employment Authority, the scandal, the committee that came out with the scandal finally concluded that there was no law setting up the National Youth Employment Program, and that made it easy for people to abuse the scheme. Why? Because again, it was rushed. Without thoughtfulness, it had to take the NDC again to draft the legislation that has now grounded the operations of JIDA. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I wish we had time. They again rushed the implementation of a 4-year senior high secondary school without containment measures. It had to take President Mills's government of the NDC to carry out emergency projects, in some cases putting up tents to contain 4th-year students. That is the difference between the NDC and the MPP. No thoroughness. It is always about what will give us votes today. Let's do it and damn the consequences in future. You talk about the scrapping of allowances, Roland. What we sought to do as a party in NDC, and that is again the mistake they make. Today they talk about free SHS and they say the banker's child and the watchman child will go to school for free. They confuse equalization with equity. The two are not the same. So what do you achieve when you make the banker's child go to school for free, when indeed he can help you solve the problems that you have in those schools and make the watchman child go for free? What then is the use of means testing? So when you come to when you come to allowances, they don't understand that what the NDC was trying to do was to ensure equity, because the training colleges, the colleges of education, have become tertiary institutions. I was in the training college. I was the national vice president of the Teacher Trainings Association of Ghana. We championed for our certificates to be upgraded, for our institutions to become tertiary. Professor Emia Kumfi at the time was Minister of Education. He told us at a meeting that it will come at a cost, and we said we wanted it. That the cost will be that we will not have allowances and we will not be fed, just like all tertiary institutions. We said we were ready. So you see, they missed the point when we seek this equity, that when you are doing education at the University of Education, Winneba, and you pay fees through student loan, your colleague who is doing the same thing at the colleges of education should not be allowed to be fed and given allowance. That is not equity. Because you are doing the same course, but just because you are doing it in the university, you come out with the same certificate, you are supposed to go and take a student loan. But because you do it in the colleges of education, you take allowance. Now, what does the restoration of the allowance solve in our education sector? We have a situation where the teacher-to-people ratio is high. Tell me, how does restoring allowance solve that? How? Because restoring allowance limits the number of people who get trained to become teachers.
That's not true.
Didn't we all see the quota system this year?
You see, that's the mischief.
Roland, didn't we all see the quota system this year?
Wait,
let's
be honest. No.
Almost half the percentage.
I didn't interrupt you. Let me finish. You see, now the point,
you didn't interrupt me.
You see, well, not that much. You see, Roland.
My time is
yes, I'm just wrapping up. You see, Roland. The point has to be made that the colleges of education today currently have a capacity to train more students than they are allowed to train because of allowance, because government budget is small. So government wants the number of people they can pay to be admitted. But the colleges can admit more. So in the thinking of the NDC, why do you limit the number of people who can go into these colleges of education and access their student loan to complete their education and permanently perhaps become teachers for life and be receiving salary just because you want to sustain an allowance? What does it solve in the scheme of things?
Go and ask the beneficiaries what is this doing for them.
You see, I have been in the colleges of education, and what I know it solves is the instant gratification. The fact that I am not going to pay this money back. It is 200 Ghana cedis because you have reduced it to 200 Ghana cedis, and so I take it.
That's not true.
And maybe I have taken. I will go.
Please, Sohini. I mean,
it used to be about 400 Ghana cedis. We understand it's only 200 that is being paid.
You understand?
That is
you don't know for a fact.
That is what the students are telling us.
It's not true.
What is the situation?
Okay, I think it's a 300 and something.
But
because you know,
below 400.
Listen. Yes, because you were charging taxes on them. Those taxes have been taken off.
But in the end, at the end of it all, they were taking 400 Ghana cedis.
They appreciate it way better than not having any tax.
You see, just in wrap up, I want to use my remaining time, Roland, if you permit me.
Actually, you use the time.
To mourn with the family of a very good friend and brother, Joshua Haruna. He was a very good friend of mine, almost a brother. And I learned of his passing just yesterday in the morning after a short illness. Joshua is very active and well known, especially among the Catholic community in Tamale, the Catholic, the Holy Cross Parish where he worshipped. My heartfelt condolences to the congregation and to his family, Laurentia and all the other family members. I understand the wakekeeping will be on Friday and burial will be on Saturday.
You'll be there.
I hope to be there, inshallah, by His grace. And I also want to thank
you say
my mates,
you fixed
the Ghana
NHIS.
Oga 97
You
group,
say you fixed
for
NHIS.
That, you know,
when you promised the one-term
nostalgia
premium,
that able
we
to-
didn't have a national health insurance. When you
enjoy.
promised the
Andrew
one-term premium,
Ejapa
never
Mesa.
I
implemented.
don't want to do propaganda. I don't want to do
You-
propaganda.
Andrew
It's
Ejapa
propaganda.
Mesa.
I don't want to engage.
Bobo is member of parliament for Second D.
Let's deal with the concrete.
And Alasan Suhini is the member of parliament for Tamale North.
Yes, we did. At the time you promised one-term premium, it was
And that's
did
it for the
We made it
segment this morning. We're taking a break. We'll be right back.